You're listening to The Secrets of Doctor Who, where we discuss everything about the hit BBC series, Doctor Who. And today we're discussing the fourth Doctor story, State of Decay. I'm Dom Bettinelli, and joining me today is Jimmy Akin. Hey, Jimmy.
Howdy, Dom.
Folks, be sure to get your very own Secrets of Doctor Who t-shirt or phone case or more by visiting sqpn.com/merch. And let's get started. Jimmy, can you give us a recap of what happens in State of Decay?
This week, the fourth Doctor and the second Romana visit a primitive planet in E-space. The planet has one medieval-level village on it, and the villagers work for their lords who live in a tower. The tower turns out to be an old Earth spaceship, and there's also a group of rebels who refuse to work for the spaceship lords. Turns out that the lords are the original astronauts who landed on the planet 1,000 years ago, and they've been kept alive all this time by becoming vampires. They are in the service of a king vampire who battled the Time Lords long ago, and he's about to arise and swarm out of E-space, killing billions. Helping him will be Adric, who's stowed away aboard the TARDIS. In the end, the villagers and the rebels storm the tower and defeat the vampire's force of guards. Then the Doctor programs one of the tower's old scout ships to launch upward and come back down and spear the king vampire through the heart, after which all the regular vampires die. The end.
So what'd you think of this one, Jimmy?
It's okay.
Yeah, I agree.
It's not the greatest, but it's not terrible either.
Yeah. This is a lot of over-the-top acting by the vampires, the very classic vampiric ways of being.
And by the rebels and so forth about, let's attack them now. No, we must learn more. Attack them now. No, we must learn more.
And in Adric, it's the second episode. And right off the bat, he's a jerk.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah. So the Doctor and Romana don't even know he's on the TARDIS at this point. He finds his way after they've left. He finds his way out of the TARDIS. And he then gets picked up by one of the vampires who wants him to become the first of the chosen ones to serve the king vampire. And apparently the only of the chosen ones, since they haven't picked anybody else and they're about to start swarming. And Adric's alliances are now, he makes it sound like he's sided with the vampires once Romana tries to save him. And he eventually reveals he's trying to save Romana, but it's not at all clear that that's the plan from the beginning. I mean, he's pretty blunt about, to Romana about, you said Romana says they're vampires, Adric. Do you want to become one of them? And he says, well, you said yourself we're on the menu. If it's a choice between that and joining the diners, I mean, there's no sense in the two of us getting the job.
So blasé about the fact that you're about to become, someone who feeds off of other people. Like,
yeah, he also, points out that he's been offered a partnership, power, and eternal life, and he seems to be wooed by those offers.
And then he does walk it back later, like, I was pretending all along, but
gosh. I'm not sure it was pretending all along.
Yeah, exactly. So, I mean, he right off the bat, he starts doing dumb stuff like convincing K9 to let him leave the TARDIS in the first place on an alien planet alone. It's just like right off, like this is why people disliked Adric from the beginning. It was not a good companion.
That included the cast. Reportedly, Tom Baker and Lalla Ward. Now, they themselves had their own issues at this time, although surprisingly, I don't think it shows up on screen.
No.
I was watching Lalla Ward's reactions to Tom Baker and Tom Baker's reactions to Lalla Ward, and they seem they're good actors. They are not letting their personal differences interfere with their performances. But apparently, they both hated Matthew Waterhouse, who was this kid who had never done anything, and he's acting like he knows everything about, acting and directing and stuff like that. And so apparently Adric was well cast. Now, Matthew Waterhouse, he may well have grown as a human being in the decades since he played this part, because he was really young at the time, and young people do dumb stuff. But he reportedly did some dumb stuff. Yeah. Also, apparently, the way he was originally written in this script, it was much worse, because they really wanted him to be this artful dodger kind of criminal character. And for people who may not be aware, the Artful Dodger is a character from Oliver Twist. And he's a streetwise kid who's basically, he's a master criminal in training. But in Oliver Twist, he's just a kid and he has lots of adventures and things like that. He's sort of Oliver Twist's equivalent of Huckleberry Finn, as the kind of outsider wild child who gets to live the life that others are envious of. Even though if you think about it, like Mark Twain did in the novel Huckleberry Finn, there are some big downsides to being that character.
Yeah.
Well, they wanted Adric to kind of come across as this artful dodger character who was also a genius in mathematics for reasons. And when they saw the way he'd been written in this script, they said, "Oh no, pull it way back." So apparently Adric was much more pro-vampire and what's in it for me. In fact, that's a line that I like. Early on, when one of the vampires is trying to recruit Adric, he says, "Come with me." And Adric says, "Come with you? What's in it for me?" And right. It's like, okay, I that's a good line. And then the vampire responds, "Oh, wealth, power, dominion over this world and many others."
Yeah. So Matthew Waterhouse was 19 when he first started playing this role.
He sure doesn't seem it.
He seems a lot younger. And apparently, according to the TARDIS Wiki, he started as a clerk in the BBC News department, got a role in a TV drama, and then very quickly afterward got this role. So he had no experience coming into this. And I mean, being an actor on TV is harder than it seems. I know that. I mean, I can just imagine how hard it is. And so in order to pull it off at all is an accomplishment, but he's not a good actor. He's just, oh man. Yeah. So, and he was apparently the youngest companion until the Amy Pond as a girl.
Yeah, the young Amy Pond.
The young Amy Pond. Yeah. So Adric, let's look at the premise itself. So you have this medieval like society, serfs serving lords, but it kind of turns out they're really cattle in a sense, that they're culled every once in a while to feed the vampires.
Although they don't know that it's unclear. Well, that's not everybody's fate who gets selected. Some of them like become guards and stuff like that.
Right. Some servants in the tower and whatnot, but some just disappear. They're kept from having any sort of knowledge of like reading or any other like writing, that sort of thing, or history or stories or anything like that. So they're kept uneducated. And what was the other thing? One of them has a line. Their lives are work, sleep, serve the lords faithfully and well, and they will allow you to live until you die worn out. That's all there is for them. Like that is that is the worst kind of life. There's no hope.
So you're saying you feel sympathy for Adric taking up the vampire offer to something else.
Well, what I was thinking about was, real medieval peasants, real medieval serfs, they at least had faith to give them something beyond the daily life, the daily difficulties of life. Although, let's be clear, the actual lives of medieval peasants was better than most movies and TV shows portray it. They didn't, live literally in the mud, that sort of stuff.
It was both better and worse.
Yeah, sure. but they had faith. They had hope that comes with their faith. So
also, they had more relaxed work schedules than we do, which left them additional time to do things like play music and tell stories and all kinds of things like that.
Mm-hmm. And these guys have none of that. I can't imagine. Again, they lived like this for 1,000 years. They say, since the ship crashed into E-space, and this is all they've had, and it's kind of bleak when you look at it. They really set up a bleak situation. They talk about
which actually works in terms of serving as a motivator for why the peasants ally with the rebels so quickly at the end.
Yes, that's right.
In fact, we're given to understand that. So the head man of the village is a guy named Ivo, which is an interesting name. It may mean yew tree, although in some contexts it's also another version of the name John.
Right.
But anyway, Ivo is actually in secret communication with the rebels constantly. He's got a walkie-talkie that he talks to the rebels on. And so even though the villagers are not in a position to openly break with the lords from the beginning, they are part of this anti-vampire conspiracy.
Mm. And they've like you mentioned, the walkie-talkie, they've gotten a hold of forbidden technology that they're trying to figure out. Mm-hmm. The doctor comes along and helps them get their computer running using percussive maintenance, which I thought was amusing, which the doctor then eventually has to use at the end on the scout ship that he finally gets to launch, because none of them will start up after 1,000 years. And then he just gets frustrated and bangs the console and it starts up. Mm-hmm. So that was funny. He makes a reference to Earth technology seems to respond to percussive maintenance on occasion.
Also, speaking of technology, so Romana reveals to the doctor at one point that, because the Time Lords have fought the vampires before, the real vampires, not these little human ones.
Right.
But the real vampires are these gigantic creatures, and one of them can suck the life out of an entire planet and stuff like that. And they fought them in what will later be called the Dark Times. And although that term does not appear in this story, but Romana reveals to the doctor that she used to work in this Hall of Records on Gallifrey for a time, and she came across this thing called the Record of Rassilon that had some pertinent information about the vampires in it, and it was installed in Type 40 TARDISes. So the doctor goes back to the TARDIS to get the Record of Rassilon so he can read about the vampires. And K9 searches the databanks and says there's nothing in here about a record of Rassilon, but he says the TARDIS has a magnetic card system. And so the doctor goes to get the magnetic card system, and those are apparently magnetic punch cards, because the doctor is feeding punch cards into the TARDIS console. And if you don't know the history of computer technology, punch cards are cards that don't use magnetic strips to house data. The data is housed in punches that are punched out of the card. And then the computer has a reader that probes for where are the holes in this card and extracts the data from it that way. So even though K9 has said that the TARDIS has a magnetic card system, it's actually not magnetic cards, it's paper punch cards. I remember using those as a kid.
Same here. Mm-hmm. The lunch cards that we had in school, when you get a lunch card, it was a whole punch card. In any case, that's some old technology. So early on, we get a reference to, you don't want to be out at night because of, you get the wasting disease. The wasting will, not the disease, but the wasting will get you. Mm-hmm. And then it turns out it's probably swarms of bats being controlled by Akin because vampires. And the doctor even gets bit at one point, but nothing seems to come of that.
No.
It seems like they kind of dropped the ball on the wasting and the bats.
Yeah, they never. I never was clear on what the wasting is.
I thought for sure the doctor getting bit by this bat would end up meaning, oh, he's gonna start exhibiting, I don't know, some disease or become a vampire.
Traits. Yeah.
Yeah.
Nope, not this time.
That seemed to be a lost thing there. Maybe the idea was that the tower protected the people from the wasting, so it was a way to keep people in line. Maybe as a fake issue. When the doctor and Romana first show up in the village, the people have no concept of strangers because they are the only people on this planet, which is an interesting idea. A society with no concept of strangers, everybody. But the guards immediately assume that the doctor and Romana are like of the aristocratic class. It was like, why would they assume that?
Because they're dressed too well to be peasants.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, you can identify people if they're not like dirty, grubby, wearing rags. They're a lord, and you can also tell who's a vampire by do they wear weird triangular copper eyeshadow.
Yes, that was the three rulers, the king and the queen and the advisor, who seems to be the guy really in charge.
Yeah, we should mention them. So the king is a guy named it starts with a Z. Where is it? Zargo. His queen is named Camilla, and their advisor is named Akin. Aukon is the way it's spelled.
Yeah.
And the doctor mentions at one point, and this is true, that the Brothers Grimm of fairy tale fame discovered a law of consonantal shift, whereby in European languages, harder consonants get softened over time. And so they shift from one consonant to another. An example of this would be the bilabial sound that we use for the letter P.
Yeah.
Becoming softer as like f, which we use for the letter F. And so you find this transition from a consonant, and consonants are where you restrict or close the airflow coming through your mouth, as opposed to vowels, which don't. But we have harder sounding consonants like p becoming softer ones like f, which also, if you turn on your vocal cords, can then become the V sound that we use for the letter V. And so the doctor mentions this to Romana, that the Brothers Grimm found this, and she knows what the law is. And then she sees what the doctor's pointing at, because they've also learned that the three officers of the ship that crashed 1,000 years ago were named Miles Sharkey, which becomes Zargo. Lauren McMillan, the navigator, becomes Camilla, and Anthony O'Connor, the science officer, becomes Akin.
Right.
And that's part of the. Initially, they think they may be descendants of the original three, but eventually they realize, no, they're just the same three, and they've been alive all this time because they're vampires.
It would have been funny if the doctors started calling them Miles, Lauren, and Anthony.
Yeah. Or Tony.
How they reacted. So the Great One, meaning the
king vampire.
King vampire. He needs to be fed blood. Like he's under the underground, like buried, entombed under the tower.
I do like the scene under the tower. There's a patch of ground where you can hear the king vampire's heart beating really loud, and it's like 26 beats a minute. So, because I measured it. And it's like, oh, wow, the king vampire works out. He is fit. That's a good heart rate for someone who, I mean, he's clearly not a slacker. But they also have this patch of ground pulse up and down. And I think that's an effective visual when we're watching the ground pulse up and down, and eventually it starts cracking, and eventually he sticks his hand up through it, and it's a gigantic hand.
Right. You get a sense of how big he must be. Like, he's not just like 6 feet tall or 8 feet tall. He's enormous, like stories tall.
50 feet tall or something.
Yeah. So the Doctor and Romana kind of find the hidden passageway in the throne room to explore the rest of the ship, the actual ship that the tower was. And they find the scout ships at the top. There's 3 of them, which is kind of an interesting design to have the scout ships at the nose. And they're very needle-like, which will be very useful at the end. And then their Arrow class, which is what leads when the Doctor thinks about it, reminds him, oh, this is why, a wooden stake and arrow would be useful to kill a vampire. Mm-hmm. They find the fuel tanks, and the fuel tanks are not empty. They're filled with blood, which is being used to feed the Great One. That's a lot of blood to fill up fuel tanks on a spaceship. They've been keeping there. And it's this great enemy of the Time Lords who's going to swarm back into our universe from E-space and, suck the universe dry and kill everyone. So there's an effective peril, I guess. Although, the rare universal stakes of the Classic Who, which New Who kept doing. But it also shows, okay, there's a way back, and that's probably going to be important, right? That because the Doctor and Romana are trying to find a way back out of E-space back into regular space.
Mm-hmm. By the way, speaking of E-space, I think last week we talked about, is it smaller than in space? And yes, it is. They confirmed that in this episode. Right.
So it's like I said, the Doctor figures out how to kill the giant vampire. And we have a big, in the fourth installment, we have a big set piece of the rebels fighting back, and the fighting in the halls, and the Doctor trying to, launch the
lots of dead bodies in the halls.
Yeah. A lot of these people end up dying. There's an interesting moment when the chief guard, his name's Habris, he tells Akin that the guards are outnumbered by the rebels and peasants, and that if the lords of the tower don't come and help, they're all going to die. And the lords of the tower, that we're too busy with our right of raising up the king vampire, so you need to go fight. And he's like, but we'll die. And Akin just says, that is the purpose of guards.
Well, he says, then die. That is the purpose of guards. Yeah. And I think they missed an opportunity here. What should have happened after Akin delivered that line is the guards should have sided with the rebels and the villagers. Right. Because why would you bother dying for someone who doesn't care whether you live or die?
Yeah. So that would have been good, actually. But Habris eventually dies at the hands of Ivo, who is taking revenge for his son being killed. Because Habris selected Ivo's son.
Right. And led Ivo to believe that his son would be made into a guard, but he wasn't.
Right. He was fodder, food. And so you have the launch of this thing that's as ersatz stake through the heart,
which is fine conceptually, but I wish they'd done a little bit more in terms of the targeting of this thing. I mean, how do they know it's just going to come up and come back down again from what they said? How do they know it's not going to miss the king vampire altogether or spear him through the leg or something like that?
Right. Was he going to dodge to the left? There wasn't much to that in the Doctor's preparations. And then with the king vampire dead, that basically leaves the 3 rulers.
Fatal point of failure resolution.
Yeah, they dissolve. How did they don't really cover, like, how did they get this way to begin with? That, if the king vampire is, hibernating.
Well, apparently the king vampire was banished to E-space, and he summoned the Hydrax, that was the Earth ship, into E-space through a charged vacuum embointment, and then turned the 3 main crew members, the captain, the navigator, and the science officer, into vampires. Presumably he made them some kind of deal like they tried to make Adric. And then they took the rest of the crew and used it to found the village.
Okay. And then he had a 1,000-year plan to get to a point where he could, and man, right just as this plan was about to come to fruition after 1,000 years, here comes the Doctor to screw it all up.
The TARDIS takes the Doctor where he needs to go.
The true hero of all of Doctor Who is the TARDIS.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Just like R2-D2 in Star Wars.
Something, I forget if I've mentioned this before, but the Doctor is so carefree about, and it's not just Tom Baker's Doctor, it's all of them, are so carefree about the risks that they take that I have this theory that the Doctor has a limited form of precognition that tells him, is what I'm about to do truly dangerous, or is it just all going to work out somehow?
Right.
And as long as he has the feeling this is going to work out, he can take ridiculous risks because he's getting information from the future about, don't worry, this will work out, this crazy plan. But other times he'll get the message, no, this is serious. And that explains the Doctor's mood shifts about whether he's open or closed to taking what seems like a ridiculous risk.
I think you mentioned that before, but yeah. I mean, as I'm trying to think back through all the different Doctors right up to the 15th, that kind of tracks a little bit. It would have to, because man, he takes some dumb risks. All right. Any other thoughts on this one?
Let's see. Oh, one thing that I would be curious to know. So, Romana is an active agent in this. And like when the Doctor goes back to the TARDIS to read the record of Rassilon, she stays. They agree that she will stay and rescue Adric. So this was not a case of Tom Baker, throwing his weight around as the series star. It's like, well, I must do all the dramatic rescues. No, he trusts Romana to do the rescue. And so that's nice. And I think that's a positive for Lalla Ward as an actress, to be, and this is her penultimate story, because next is her last story.
Okay.
But she's, being an active agent here. She's towards the end, they're going to sacrifice her and she spends some time hypnotized, as they're getting ready to sacrifice her. But what I wonder is what her reaction was to this story, because State of Decay is a vampire, and the title refers to how their culture is stagnant and is regressing. It's not progressing. So they're in a state of decay culturally. But what I wonder is how she reacted to State of Decay, because in 1972, a few years earlier, she was one of the stars of the movie Vampire Circus, which was like one of the, I forget if Hammer made it. It may well have, but it's in the style of Hammer horror films from the 1970s. And so she had been, she had starred in vampire movies before, and I just wonder what it felt like to her come in full circle to the same kind of plot, full circle being the previous episode. Notice that, by the way.
That's right.
So I would be curious to know if she'd ever what it was like for her to be starring in a vampire story at this point.
Speaking of the previous episode, it is kind of weird that they had 2 episodes in a row that involved an Earth spaceship that entered into E-space and crashed on a planet, and over generations, people were changed.
You haven't seen the 3rd episode yet.
Oh, we have a pattern. Okay. Anything else?
Nope.
All right. So that's it for State of Decay. And before we go, we want to take a moment to thank our patrons who make it possible for us to create the Secrets of Doctor Who, including Michael K., Valcovius, Rob G., Mary S., and Mary H. Their generous donations at sqpn.com/give make it possible for us to continue the Secrets of Doctor Who and Secrets of Star Trek and all the shows at StarQuest and you can join them by visiting sqpn.com/give. So we'd love to know what you think of this Fourth Doctor story, State of Decay. You can let us know by commenting on the show at sqpn.com, the Secrets of Doctor Who Facebook page. Send an email to drwho@sqpn.com. Visit the StarQuest Discord community at sqpn.com/discord, or watch The Secrets of Doctor Who on our YouTube channel at youtube.com/StarQuestMedia. We'll be back next time when we'll be discussing the first Doctor story, The Savages. Until then, Jimmy Akin, thank you for joining me and sharing The Secrets of Doctor Who.
Thanks, Dom.
And once again, I'm Dom Bettinelli. Thank you for listening to The Secrets of Doctor Who on StarQuest, and remember, there's nothing worse than a peasant with indigestion.